My name's Ed Brubaker, and I am a comic book writer and a screenwriter. I write for Marvel Comics. I write Captain America for the last 7 or 8 years. I wrote the famous Death of Captain America storyline a few years back, and I do a series called Criminal, which Will actually guest appeared in the recent storyline of, and I wrote Sony's first web series that they did, Angel of Death. I knew from the time I was a little kid that you could make a living writing stories because my uncle was a famous screenwriter. He wrote The Wild One and On the Beach and Murder My Sweet. So I never had any other thought of something to do that wasn't creative. I used to draw comics that I wrote, and I've always just written stories my whole life. When I was working at DC Comics on Batman, I actually created a Batman villain. I wrote the first 2 chapters of a longer story, and the artist got taken off of the book after the first issue and put onto something else, and we never finished it, but I created what I thought would have been a classic Batman villain, and it was a guy, I think his name was the Maestro, and he was basically an evil orchestra conductor. I am a gamer. I have been a bigger gamer at different times in my life. I like story games. Like, I was a huge D&D player when D&D first came out, and I probably not when it first came out, but when I first discovered it, I was in junior high school. With the advent of the console gaming system, me and a lot of my friends who also are writers would do things like sit around and play Call of Duty until late at night and talk to each other on our headsets and make fun of each other and plot out stories together. I was never a huge tabletop game player until one of my best friends, he turned me on to games other than Monopoly, which I always found Monopoly to be the most frustrating game because it would seem like you were on the top of everything, and then you just roll one wrong roll of the dice and everybody has all your money and you've lost all your property. It just seemed like too many highs and lows. If you can't shoot someone in the face, I feel like there's something missing about the game sometimes. But there's a whole world of tabletop games that, they're like these adventure stories. Like the one we played tonight, it was like you could imagine the story of it at the same time. One time I actually did try to create my own game, and I wrote an entire rule book for a game called Bloodthirsty Immortal Headhunters. I still have that entire rule book at home. I designed all the artifacts and everything. It was a lot of fun. I spent days and days doing this when I probably should have been doing something more productive, but it was a lot of fun. And it's just really interesting to see that because my favorite games are the ones where there is some story element to it, and that was really my whole goal in designing it was how do I make this game last as long as possible? How many sword fights can we get in? In any fantasy-related game that I'm playing, if there's an option to be a halfling thief, I will always play a halfling thief. I think the moment I discovered The Hobbit as a kid just imprinted on my mind that anytime there is a fantasy option, there must be like a Bilbo Baggins character to play. Gaming is a kind of complicated and interactive fun that I think a lot of America and probably the rest of the world at this point in our high-speed culture is a little too ADD and a little too lazy to realize how much fun they're actually missing out on.